Tons of news to talk about today. Let's start out with this. So a lot of eyes are on the 50 Super Series GPUs. They are heavily rumored at this point, and most people assume they would be coming at some point in 2026, because usually there's at least a year gap in between the initial GPU generation and the Super Series, if there is one. Now, the latest rumors I'm seeing headlines about are saying that it could actually be here in 2025, some point in Q4, or at least by the holiday season. And this would bring the massive VRAM upgrades a lot of people have been looking for. But, when I see these types of rumors, I'm like, where is this coming from? So I tracked this down to what seems to be the original source of the 2025 dates, which is at Tweaktown. So at Tweaktown, we have this posted by senior editor Costa Andriadis. I may have butchered the pronunciation. Apologies if I did. And the summary here is NVIDIA's GeForce RTX 50 Super Series refresh launching in late 2025 features a significant 50% VRAM increase across models with up to 24GB GDDR7 memory and higher boost clocks. The 5070 Super also gains CUDA cores, enhancing performance for gaming and AI workloads on the Blackwell architecture. But where are they getting this information from? So if you go down and down and down, you eventually just say, based on information obtained from sources. So, sources. I don't know how to rate that because obviously he's not saying who his sources are. And so I don't know how to rate the quality of those sources or what we should think. Now, at this point, whether it comes out at the end of 2025 or the beginning of 2026, it is seeming more and more likely that we will be getting these Super Series cards. So as a quick reminder, generally this is what it looks like. Videocards.com has a good table for this. By the way, all my sources today will be linked in my video description, so go ahead and check them out there for all of the details and perusing at your leisure. Anyway, the 5080 has a super variant rumored, which if you look at it compared to the original 5080, it has the same number of CUDA cores, so you would not expect much more performance, but it could potentially have some more performance if it has a slightly higher clock speeds or something like that. Now, the 5080 itself has shown a lot of overclocking potential, so is it possible that NVIDIA sort of sandbagged the baseline 5080 to allow an overclocked 5080 Super to at least have some sort of, 5% performance advantage just due to faster clock speeds or something like that? It's possible. The biggest reason you would maybe consider this is the 24GB of VRAM instead of 16. Now, how would you fit that onto the same bus? Well, it's getting the 3GB modules instead of the 2GB modules. So replacing each 2GB module with a 3GB module gets you that 50% VRAM increase that we're seeing there. Now, the 5070 Ti is also rumored to get a super model, which again is rumored to have the same CUDA core count as its baseline version, but again, some increased power usage, which again, some of that needs to feed the new VRAM, but if some of it's also dedicated to slightly higher clock speeds or something like that, again, maybe you'd have a small but not particularly noticeable performance increase, but again, going up from 16 to 24GB. Now, the 5070 getting a super version, this one seems a little bit more exciting. In addition to increased VRAM capacity, which, getting above 16 is nice, but maybe not as crucial as getting above 12. 12 would go all the way up to 18 if you get those 3GB modules, giving you that 50% increase in VRAM. So that's pretty interesting, but again, you're also getting a small core count increase. The rumor is going from 6,144 up to 6,400, which is not much. If it was paired with any sort of an increase in clock speeds, though, who knows? The point is the 5070 Super could be pretty interesting if it came in at the same price as the original, which is $550, or at least hopefully not going over $600. I could potentially see them asking $599 MSRP or something like that. Hopefully they don't get too carried away. At this point, though, the main thing I'm disappointed that we haven't seen rumors for is a 5060 Super, because the 5060 with only 8GB of VRAM could desperately use those 3 GB modules. If that got it up to 12, this card would be so much easier to recommend. If you had a card with the same performance as the 5060 at about the same price of $300, but with 12 gigabytes instead of 8, it would be extremely easy to recommend. So hopefully that comes in and just maybe isn't rumored yet. Usually the lower end cards get launched later. So maybe that we just haven't seen rumors for it yet, even though it will eventually be incoming. However, with the 40 series, they did get a super refresh, but it did not include a refreshed 4060. So maybe the 60 class will be left out again. We'll have to see, because the reality of the situation is NVIDIA could sell the same silicon as a data center product for AI for so much more money that it's maybe they're just not that interested in these $300 cards when they could make so much money on something else. On a related note to that, Unico's hardware is posting about how there's a booming business in China of taking 5090 gaming cards and just stripping them and rebuilding them into blower-style cards for AI data center usage, which has something to do with why the 5090, which already has an astronomical MSRP of $2,000, is still selling well above that. Because again, when used as an AI product, there's just so much more money available there in that industry, which is still booming. Now, in other news, kind of on the complete opposite end of the high-end 50 series stuff, it's possible that we'll be seeing a new version of the RTX 3050, but interestingly based on the Ada architecture rather than the Ampere architecture, which is generally what we get for the 30 series. Now, this is coming from not like our Copite 7 Kimi leakers like we get on the biggest GPU rumors, but this is coming from a GPU Z update. I saw it reported here at WCCF Tech, but the GPU Z update they're referring to just mentions RTX 3050A AD106-A, which would be an Ada chip. Interesting. We'll have to see if anything actually comes of that, whether that's mobile or desktop. It didn't list mobile, so we'll have to see if anything actually comes of that and whether it performs any differently, or hey, the 40 series Ada stuff generally had frame gen support, but if they're still going to brand this as a 30 series card, I'm imagining they wouldn't want to confuse people and offer any frame gen support. I don't know, but we'll have to see if anything comes of that. Now, if you're wondering if there's anything interesting coming out of the Intel front, the main thing I'm looking at is hopefully they're not cutting their GPU division, because things just look disastrous over there as far as just slashing, and I am really feeling for all the people who are losing their jobs. And it's looking like 15,000 more jobs are on the table after the thousands they have already cut. The new CEO is discussing cutting another 30% of the workforce, over 15,000 more jobs, and there's no more blank checks to programs that they're developing. So again, I've been trying to comb through this to see if there's any mention of cutting their GPU division. So far, I don't see it. But even on the CPU and foundry side of things, there's question marks, because we're seeing talks of Intel will drop out of the cutting edge chip race if it doesn't see external customer interest, possibly marking the fall of a key custodian of Moore's Law. This is again a WCCF Tech article, but they're referencing some information given by Intel's CEO. The main idea here is that Intel's foundries, Intel actually makes, at least in their CPUs, mostly makes their own silicon in their own foundries, whereas almost everybody else is buying, high-end capacity from TSMC. Now, Intel would like to get some external customers for their foundries, but if they don't get some major ones, apparently it's could be on the chopping block as well. Now, what that means for their CPU division, would they continue to develop stuff for themselves at all? Or would they, start to also just buy from TSMC? I mean, we'll have to see what comes of this, but there are major shakeups and changes happening at Intel, and we'll just have to keep our eye on it. On the other hand, at AMD, they're introducing their new Zen 5-based Threadripper chips. This is not rumors, this is official, but most of you won't care because they cost Oh, $5,000. Well, don't worry, you can get a less expensive version at $1,500 if you only want 24 cores and 48 threads. But the 32-core 64-thread variant is $2,500, and the 64-core 128-thread variant is $5,000. Now, these aren't really going to be what you're looking for gaming chips, so I think most people on my channel are just mildly interested to be like, wow, that's expensive, and probably not planning on actually buying one, but there you go. Those are official. I would expect benchmark results soon, most likely. Now, speaking of getting lists of products and whatnot out there, I don't really cover gaming laptop stuff. One reason I don't is because, okay, so you review a 5060 laptop. Okay, but what if another 5060 laptop runs it at a different power spec? Or maybe there's a 5070 laptop and it runs it at a lower power spec than a 5060 laptop. And now which one actually performs better? And it's kind of a mess. I don't follow it too much myself, but in case this is useful for you, ASUS has published the GPU power specifications for their 2025 ROG and TUF gaming laptops. Now, I'm not going to read through all of this, but again, links will be in the video description, where basically it lists the laptop model and the laptop GPU, and it gives you your turbo mode TGP, manual mode, dynamic boost, etc. I think how zoomed in I am was making those columns not line up. There we go. I think that lines up a little bit better for you. So I will just kind of pan on down here real quick. But again, I would say follow the source in the video description if you're interested in sorting any of that out, so you can figure out what sort of performance you might actually be getting from the GPU that's in the laptop that you're interested in. Anyway, there's that. Now, I am interested in gaming handhelds. I honestly game on my Steam Deck more than anything else lately. Honestly, I've been playing Monster Train 2 because I have played so much Slay the Spire. I was looking for, is there other stuff kind of like it? But I've played this to death. So anyway, if you were interested in what am I actually spending most of my time on lately, the last week or so, it's been Monster Train 2 on my Steam Deck. Anyway, I am kind of interested in higher performance handhelds, though. And so I've been interested in these Strix Halo-based handhelds. Now, to be honest, though, I don't think Strix Halo is actually going to make a great chip for handhelds because of how power hungry it is to actually reach its full performance. Now, if you're unfamiliar, the Strix Halo APUs are very powerful for APUs, but they'd make more sense in a desktop like mini PC format because then you can feed them as much power as you want. In a handheld running off of battery, it's a little bit more questionable. Now, there's two of these I've seen announced so far. The latest one is the ANEO version, but we don't have a lot of information about it other than it will exist. And it's like a dual fan cooler, and it will have an internal battery. The other one we've been seeing information about is the GPD Win 5, which is also running off Strix Halo. But I've seen reports that it will have an external 80 watt-hour battery. So that's interesting. Might make it a lot less portable, but you can still use, I don't know. We'll have to see what comes of it. Now, videocards.com does have this helpful table, which is nice, which is to compare the specs of everything we know about these two so far. We know a lot more about the GPD Win 5 than we do about the ANEO Next 2. They both should be released this year. We're expecting the GPD Win 5 in October. And we have more knowledge about its weight, like 550 grams of the device, but the battery, again, external, would add a lot more weight if you're thinking about packing both around in your backpack or something. We know some of its dimensions. It has a 180 watt charger that has the external battery pack at 80 watts, a single fan cooler. It has a 7-inch 120 hertz screen. And again, will be designed to run in a 40, I think this is supposed to be 45 watt to 75 watt TDP range. We know so much less about the ANEO version that at this point it's like, we'll have to kind of wait and see. But like I said, I have my doubts on how these will function as handhelds due to the power, the amount of power that you're supposed to feed that chip to get good performance, but could still be kind of interesting to check out. Anyway, now Also in the GPU space, I only follow this a little bit, but like to report when there's any major developments. What we'd really like to eventually get is more competition in the GPU space to drive down prices. And so there's these domestic Chinese cards, which I don't think are anywhere near the point where they make sense for people to be buying as gaming cards, especially if you're not in the domestic Chinese market. But it's still interesting to follow the developments. So latest one we're seeing is that there's another high-end Chinese GPU emerging online, the More Threads MTT S90 reportedly outperforming the GeForce RTX 4060 with solid gaming performance. Now, the kinds of numbers we're seeing here are mostly synthetic benchmarks. And so I don't know exactly what to make of that. My real issue with a lot of these cards is the software support. Like, do they really support all of the latest games? Last time I looked into that with the More Threads cards, it was kind of disastrous. Some games could run kind of okay. So it's one thing to have synthetic benchmark numbers out there, but it's something completely different to be actually performing well in most video games. Even Intel, trying to enter with their Arc GPUs, has really struggled on that front. Now, they've come a long way and are in pretty good shape now. But it really shows that the software side of things is a whole other ballgame compared to just getting physical hardware out there, which is also difficult in and of itself. Now, interestingly, while I had heard about More Threads before, I'm also starting to see reports, this one at videocards.com, of a Chinese Lisuan Tech, I probably mispronounced that and apologies if I did, 7G106 GPU, which has apparently been demonstrated playing Black Myth Wukong at 4K, with unspecified frame rates, but seems to at least be playable. However, in 3D Mark benchmark scores showing scores below an RTX 5050, it apparently has DX12 support, although not ray tracing. Now, again, like I said, I think it's going to be pretty difficult to say without again, I want to be clear, I'm not planning on buying one of these and testing them on the channel, but I am interested to monitor if anybody really does. I want to see what game support in general actually looks like on these things before, and I have a feeling it's going to be many, many years away before they'd be the kind of card that you just throw on your PC and assume it runs everything. But anyway, there are developments there. Now, on another note, I thought this was interesting. So Sony is apparently suing Tencent for an alleged slavish clone of its Horizon series with Light of Motorum. Now, look at this game. If you looked at this, you would be very much forgiven to assume this is a Horizon game, and looking at the actual gameplay footage they've released does nothing to make you think this isn't a Horizon game. And look, I think they're even using the same font for the game, art and showcases they've done so far. So this looks to be a pretty much a clone of Horizon. So it's interesting to see the lawsuit being filed. A lot of people were wondering if that would be the case. Now, filing the lawsuit and actually succeeding are two different things, so maybe we'll follow if there's any developments. But in other Sony-related news, we do have some more details being given about the first God of War TV series. The showrunner being asked some questions. I found this information at WCCF Tech. It looks like they were being asked by IGN, and I thought this was interesting because whenever I see that there's going to be a TV show based on a game series I like, I'm curious, are they going to honor the actual game? Because we've seen mixed results. Like, I loved Halo growing up, and I have stayed away from the Halo TV series because it looked like they were just an abomination compared to everything I loved about Halo and its lore and everything. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I ended up choosing not to watch it just because I felt like it would be too painful. But anyway, here's what we're getting here. So the quote is, "I started looking at the cutscenes together, and there is so much material there, and I really responded to the characters. I responded to the story of Kratos and his son, and then they set out on this epic journey in this world that was finely detailed and really interesting. And there's a lot of combat and interesting monsters along the way, but I kept coming back to this story of father and son. And it was just emotional and it was different, and I hadn't seen anything like that before, and I had no expectations because, like you said, I'm not a gamer. So he's being very clear, the showrunner for this, that he doesn't play these games. He's not really a gamer. He said he knew the title, he'd heard of it, but I didn't really know what the story was. So I didn't really know what I was going to be looking at, and I was just taken with it. And so I said, yeah, I'd love to do it. I think it's really interesting. So he's clear that he has not really played through the games, but when presented with the game's cutscenes, he was drawn to the story. He seems to like what's actually available in the game, that father-son journey. And by the way, that was one thing I was also interested in, is are they going with the modern version of God of War with that father-son journey, or were they going back to the series' roots of just, Kratos murders the Greek gods? But anyway, looking like it's focused on this, newer version, Kratos and his son, and that story. Another thing he's saying is the tone of the show is trying to emulate the tone of the game, which is there's this epic journey, heartfelt story of the two men setting out on this thing to honor the memory of his wife, Atreus' mother. So it has this emotional heart, but there's this sense of history of who Kratos is, this mystery about his past, what he represents, the emotion that he's going through. So there's this weight to it, but not so much weight that there's not enjoyment along the way, and there's spectacle and a lot of things going on in the world. Okay. So anyway, I'm at least hopeful that he the showrunner is inspired by the game itself, despite having not played it. So, we'll have to wait and see what we actually get delivered. But I do think as games that could make a transition into a TV series pretty well, I do think that this has a lot of potential. So that's why I'm kind of monitoring this and hoping it actually goes well. Now, speaking of old games I'm interested in, let's transition to Morrowind. So I'm interested in testing this out. I just saw this article this morning, and I'm actually curious if anyone would be interested in me trying to download this mod and check it out on the channel. I have spoken recently about Morrowind being my favorite Elder Scrolls game. I'd like to actually expand that and say it's one of my top games of all time. I don't really have a top 10 game list where I'm like solid on which one's which, but Morrowind is absolutely up there and near the top. And if I was choosing games that had like the biggest impact on me growing up and my experience with games and what they could be, Morrowind is right there, absolutely at the top with just a couple of other titles. So trying to go back to it now, though, it is certainly dated. And so there's an interesting RTX remix project that is introducing path tracing to the game, but for that to work well, you really need to update a lot of the light sources in the game. You need to update the materials and the textures to be like material-based rendering that actually responds well to the new path trace lighting. In other words, it's not as simple as let's just throw path trace lighting into the game and not update all of the assets. So apparently the goal here is to eventually update the entire game with new light sources, PBR materials, enhanced model geometry. And there's a work in progress version now available, which seems to be pretty limited. It's looking like they've updated the light sources in the Imperial prison ship that you start out on, Seydanine, Balmora, and Vivek. Over 300 individual model updates and some placement adjustments. And apparently, that's cool, but this is a massive game. So obviously, who knows when or if this will ever be finished, but this game holds a very special place in my heart. So I am interested in checking this out. Would there be interest on the channel of me just kind of like downloading this mod and seeing what's up? I don't know. Let me know in the comment sections. That's what I've got for you in the news today. Again, huge thank you to viewers, subscribers, channel members, and people who click the members who click the join button. It helps support me directly financially. So if you're interested in doing that, great. If not, that is fine, perfectly understandable. And I hope everybody has an excellent day.